Regarding product, in old days, there was this definition that separated tangibles from intangibles. Not so anymore. The definition that we're going to use is that a product is something that we can do and that meets the needs of our customers. By product, I mean product or service, as we've said before. But every product has a certain life cycle. And it goes more or less like this, the sales. At the beginning, you sell a little and you're growing, then you go into a plateau and then it falls and then it goes towards zero. In the introduction, precisely, it begins with growth. Then we have maturity, and finally we have the decline. Those are the four phases of the life cycle of a product. Now, costs during each one of these phases have a different behavior. And the difference between sales and costs, as we all know, is what generates revenue. But revenue doesn't imply profits. Let's just use our equilibrium point. And if you do your math, you will have, at the beginning, during the introduction and growth, a negative cash flow. We need to have very strong working capital for those stages. That's one reason why most business operations fail, because they do not contemplate an adequate calculation of working capital. They believe that working capital is just a number and that it keeps on having the same magnitude during time. It's not so. It changes precisely because of this relationship that we're seeing on your screen. During maturity and decline, we have positive cash flow. But not all positive cash flow are profits. Our profits are there between the end of maturity and the decline. Those are pure profits. We're covering all our costs from our sales with plenty to spare. And finally, towards the end, we incur again in losses. So, there are four phases here: introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. What are the relationships between the life cycle and strategies? Well, during our introduction phase, we must invest heavily in research and development and in developing our supply chain. During the growth phase, we have to focus on the required capacity. During the maturity phase, cost controls is the operating keyword. And in the decline phase, we must tend to eliminate products unless they strongly contribute to the reputation of the entity. For example, if we're talking about aspirin. Bayer, this German pharmaceutical company, should have phased it out a long time ago. Not so. Why? Because Bayer and aspirin are synonymous. Even if Bayer makes whatever other ton of products and aspirin is a loss function for them, it doesn't matter. The same goes for Kleenex, for a lot of other products that by now should have been phased out, but the companies cannot do it because their image is so intertwined with the product that they cannot eliminate it. How can we extend the life cycle of a product? Well, we start with the first graph that we've seen. For example, we can introduce new products. Products that tend to replace the previous one exactly when it is reaching maturity. And in that sense, we prolong our maturity for our product line. There are so many products where you see this behavior. For example, cell phones. Every single year they come up with a new model. But in essence, a cell phone is good for talking on the telephone, and that doesn't change so much. The other one is to prolong a product phase. There are certain ways. For example, you can search for new markets so that for the same product you will be keeping on selling the same. You essentially bring out everything that you can from a market, and then you go to another one to exploit them, and the next one, and the next one. And that essentially prolongs the product phase. Now, towards the end, there are so many products that you can very clearly identify in which life cycle they are. This is an old analysis, for example, in which they were talking about different products and in which phase they were on. This is valid perhaps for around year 2000. Now it's 20 years out of date. I'm just putting this as an intellectual curiosity. So, let's check what we have seen so far. The operations manager's role is to make the most efficient use of resources, and this implies programming and controlling production. What is a strategy? Essentially, what we must do in order to achieve an objective. What are the competitive strategies? Cost, time, differentiation, the strategic approaches. We have covered every single one of all these 14 points. I thank you for your attention, and I'll be seeing you in our next video. Goodbye.